2025 NFL Scouting Combine has come and gone, and now the next steps are pro days, top 30 visits. Before you know it, we'll be hitting to the draft and also, free agency upcoming as well. I'm your host, Zack Pearson. I'm joined today by Nicholas Moreano, who was at the Scouting Combine all week doing some really good work. And I decided, we get together and kind of break down what we saw, what we heard, all the good stuff at the Combine. Nick, it was a long week. How you holding up, man?
Yeah, like I was telling you before we went live, I'm kind of glad that I love the Scouting Combine. Love it every single time it comes around, but it is nice being in your own bed, going to bed at a respectable time and getting up, not super early to go interview and talk to some of these prospects. But it was a fun time. It was great doing work with you, Zach, and just getting a chance to meet some or catch up with some of the other Bears, media person, people that we know that we see all the time at Hallis Hall. It's been a little time, so it's always good to catch up.
Yeah, I don't think people kind of realize as much how the Scouting Combine, a lot of the actions at night. You get to talk to the players and stuff during the day, but at night is where everything kind of goes down. All kind of the rumors. You talk to people, kind of get some insight on things, and they're long nights, man. Because the first interviews start at 8 a.m. every day. You're not getting back in some nights till 2, 3 a.m. And they're long nights. They take a toll on your body for sure. Even a young guy like you, and I'm 35. I'm in bed, trying to be in bed by 10. So it does take a toll on you.
It was funny. Herb Howard from the Bigs, he said the NFL Scouting Combine starts at 10 p.m. And it's so relatable. That's exactly when things start happening. People are going out, and like you said, people are talking to people, and you're getting information, things like that. Yes, the interviews are important, getting to know these prospects, and that is all a part of it. But also, it is being out late, seeing who you're talking to, seeing, what information you can gather. But that statement, when he said it, I'm like, dude, that is so true.
It's perfect. That actually makes a lot of sense because of the networking and all the things you can do at night, and people you run into, beat reporters from your team, other teams, national reporters, current players are there, former players, coaches, scouts, everything. And it's a fun time, but actually this week, let's kind of get it right into it.
Yeah.
Going into this week, I thought offensive line or defensive line was the number one priority need for the Bears. That was a spot. One of those was the spot they're going to take at number 10. I might lean one way, I might lean more towards offensive line. How do you feel? What were the positions of need for you? And did anything kind of change your mind from what you've heard or talked to players or even, other people?
Yeah, so I don't think anything changed. I think it just there was more validity to the trenches being addressed for the Chicago Bears. Not only hearing from what Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson were saying on that first Tuesday, that seems like forever ago, but also just speaking with the people that have been around the Bears organization previously or, just know of it. The trenches need to be addressed, specifically that offensive line, and just hearing, look, there's always this, I think people the question, have you met with whatever so-and-so team? I get where people could get a little angry with that question, but as long as you can get a little bit more out of it, it is kind of interesting to see who have the Bears actually talked to, and they'll eventually talk to probably a majority of these top prospects. But when you hear Will Campbell's in the mix, Gray Zabel, Calvin Banks, Tyler Booker, some of the top offensive line in this draft, it makes sense given what the Bears don't have on the offensive line, guys that they can count on at this point, outside of maybe a Darnell Wright. So for me, after being there from Tuesday to Saturday, it just seems more and more like the Bears know that they have an issue on the offensive line, and they're looking for the best ways to address that, whether that comes in free agency, which is coming up, or, with some of these rising draft prospects.
Yeah, I think you're right. People do get annoyed, oh, have you met with this? Have you met with that? Because every beat reporter is asking, but you make a good point. If you ask it in a way where you could get more information, and you and I were talking about this actually, I think it was Wednesday morning, for a couple of prospects. If you ask in a way where you get a little more information, I think it's great because you can kind of understand or get tidbits about an interview process. Michael Williams, I asked him if he met with the Bears. He said he loved Ryan Poles. He loved the defensive line coach, things like that. You had a couple articles on players who have met with the Bears as well, and kind of giving some more points and information on that. So yeah, I think that's good because realistically, a lot of these players are going to meet with every single team that's there. it really comes down to the top 30 visits and who's coming in for that and things like that. In terms of the Bears looking for an offensive lineman, I think it was Ben Johnson that kind of said something pretty interesting, basically along the lines of they want physical players in the trenches. And he said both offense and defense. Now, it could be a little coach speak, could be, honest. Like that's what we're looking for. That's a trait we want. Who kind of fits your mold for that in the offensive line or maybe even defensive line? Because I look at the defensive line and like James Pierce Jr., Michael Wolf, guys like those, they're physical, but they also have like really raw traits. Was there anyone that stood out to you that when you heard that, you're like, okay, let's keep an eye on this guy?
Yeah, let's stick with that offensive line real quickly because I think a lot of those guys that I mentioned earlier do fit that. Not only do they fit, I think also Ben Johnson, like they finish in a dominant position, right? And I feel like guys that are upright and, finishing a block to the end of the whistle. Like I see a guy like Tyler Booker, and I know he didn't test well in terms of the on-field stuff, but dude, you just put on his tape and you see a physical player who's consistent, who's not gonna who takes pride in keeping the quarterback upright. So I see him being a fit there. Gray Zabel, it was interesting listening to him, Zach, and he was a standout at the Senior Bowl, playing all three interior offensive line positions, but he has met with the Bears. And he also was like highlighting that he saw Caleb Williams tape, which that wasn't like brought up, but it's like he's bringing that up himself. And that's a guy that also displays physicality when he's playing, at whatever position on the offensive line. So there's a lot of these guys that really fit that bill. Kelvin Banks from Texas. If you see this guy go out in space and there is a small, and as he should, as there's a smaller DB, what he told me when I asked the question is like, he's looking to run through somebody's face. And that's what an offensive lineman should do when they get that specific matchup. So I think there are a lot of guys that apply that physicality, that dominance at the position. I'll add on the defensive line real quick, a guy that was, I think, rising up some draft boards just because of what he did on the football in terms of the workouts. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Yeah. I don't know if that's in play at 10, but somebody that's going to fit all the physical attributes that Dennis Allen is looking for in an opposite end for Montez Sweat, but he killed it in the on-field workouts. Like there's a bunch of guys that I think fit the characteristics that the Bears are currently looking for.
Yeah, and I think the Bears are in a good spot at 10. Like I know the Adam Schefter quote where he said, a guy you get at 10, you could get at like 35, I think it was, or something kind of crazy like that. I still think they're in a good spot because, like you said, someone like Shamar Stewart, maybe climbing, maybe someone takes a chance on him early. Another one, the Missouri offensive tackle, Armand Memu, who is flying in the draft boards. Like he was actually mocked to the Bears the morning of the combine by Mel Kiper. And I'm looking here, like PFF has him number 5 overall, the first offensive lineman off the board, which, could happen. He had solid combine. He's kind of that guy, I think, that took the spotlight this year in terms of the offensive lineman, for what he did, what he tested. And also, Will Campbell, the arm length is kind of the issue a lot of people have. But, it might benefit the Bears in terms of Will Campbell falling to number 10. So I do think the Bears are in a good spot. I think they're in a spot where they're going to have probably 5-6 names they really like at number 10. And the reality is, I think at least, 5 to 6 will be there. Maybe, either Campbell or one of the other offensive linemen like Banks goes early. The other one should be there. I just don't think they're in a terrible spot, coming out of this combine or anything like that.
No, I don't see that either. And yeah, Membo, like running his 40-yard dash, he's like grunting after every 10 yards. Like, you know what? That's a guy showing that he's competing. And what I think he had the second fastest 40 time behind Jared Wilson from Georgia center. So a guy that was skyrocketing, I think, after this week. And that's the thing with the combine, man. Like you come in with this perception of somebody or knowing what they had done on film, but then these measurables for some teams can go a long way. So Zach, I'm curious your take on this, but we also know in addition to the defensive line that the Bears are clearly interested in, talking to a bunch of guys, they're also interested in a lot of, sounds like running backs at this point.
Yes.
I just don't think Genty, as much as he can maybe change an offense, is going to be the guy that they go with.
Yeah, well, he's got the top 30 visit, right? That was kind of
Yeah.
reported that he's going to be on
Mm-hmm.
top 30. I like I've said it, like I think it's more of a luxury pick at 10. Like you're
Yeah.
ready to win. It's something that the Chiefs would or something like that would do. Obviously they're not going to pick in 10 for a while, but I don't know. For the Bears, you have so many needs on the offensive line. You have a need, as a pass rusher on the defensive line. You could even, like, if Mason Graham falls, I think there's an argument there to add another, 3 technique or, defensive tackle there. I just, I think they're going to take a running back. And I think what this combine told me was they're doing their homework. They're very interested. I don't think it'll be Genty. I don't think it'll be Amarian Hampton because I think he played himself into the top, third, first round essentially. He had a fantastic combine. I think it's gonna be like someone like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. Is it Devin Neal? I think out of Kansas, and then the 2 Ohio State running backs are going to be there probably on day 2, day 3. So I do think they're going to take a running back. The Genty stuff, just like to me, man, it feels like it's a luxury pick, a pick that you have to absolutely make sure he's Saquon Barkley. Like he has to be Saquon Barkley. It's just too high for me to take another running back right there at 10.
No, I completely agree with you. Sorry about the little technical difficulty there, but yeah, I completely understand that. And I think Daniel Jeremiah had a really, really good point when at some time during the broadcast, he said, when you're thinking about drafting a running back high and investing that draft capital in them, you want to make sure that their snaps count.
Yeah.
And when you think about the Bears and their situation, given what they don't have on the offensive line, drafting a guy at 10 at the running back spot, if it was Genty, I don't think, and at that point they would have addressed somebody in free agency, maybe getting a Drew Dahlman, something like that. But that's still not going to be the best version the offensive line could be if you use that 10th pick to get somebody on the interior, something like that. So, and you look at there are a lot of capable backs in this draft where I think you build up these trenches, you still can get a lot of value from somebody on day 2, day 3 at that position to complement DeAndre Swift, because that's the thing too. DeAndre Swift's not going anywhere. I don't believe that's happening, especially given his contract. They just signed the guy. And we also heard from Ben Johnson, some of that, he likes Swift. So I just don't think that's the case, but I get it. Like Ben Johnson was just in a place where they went up to go to number 12 to select Jahmyr Gibbs. But that offensive line was in a far better place than what the Bears currently are at right now. So that's where I think I think there's a little bit of smoke. Getting a 30 visit is something notable for Genty, but I don't see it at 10.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be their top 3 offensive linemen are off the board, and they believe that like Williams and Pierce, like they're not going to be stud pass rushers. It'd be a coach pick. It'd be someone that Ben Johnson's probably pounding the table for, saying, I need this guy. I want this guy in my offense. That to me, that's a Ben Johnson pick. Because you're right. Like the line, there's no Penei Sewell on this offensive line. Like you could argue the Bears need 4 new offensive linemen, depending on how you feel about Braxton Jones. And, Trey Smith essentially staying in Kansas City right now. The Bears are kind of in a spot where, they're going to have to overpay a little bit, I think, in free agency for a guard. Dahlman as a center would be nice. Will Fries is out there as well. Banks from San Francisco. And then who was it? The Cincinnati guard was just released, like 2 hours ago. Totally blanking on his name. But they have options. But to me, it's not, none of those to me are surefire. Like we've definitely upgraded the offensive line. I feel a lot better by adding one of them. If they get a center, like let's say they go out and get Dahlman and Fries, they draft, Will Campbell, they draft a tackle, I'd be a little more, happy with the offensive line. And then, in the second round, you could take Caleb Johnson, or you could take one of the Ohio State backs, maybe later on in the 3rd round or something like that. So, yeah, it just kind of feels like they're just doing their homework just to do it, and nothing hurts. But like I said, I feel like Genty would have to be Saquon just to be that, because like just to justify the pick. Because, like, who knows, next year, the year after, there could be another stud running back, and you could be sitting, or multiple. Like, who had Amarian Hampton in the 1st round going into this scouting combine? Not a lot of people. Caleb Johnson kind of climbed his stock beginning of the year to the end of the season playing for Iowa. So it's going to happen. But let me ask you this then: you're sitting there at 10. The Bears are picking. Let's say Will Campbell's there. Let's say Mason Graham's there. Let's say, someone out like Michael Williams or James Pearson is there. Where are you leaning right now coming out of the scouting combine?
Man, it's a great question. I know. Okay, so I'm going to stay consistent. I was talking to some people on that very last day when the offensive linemen were talking, just in the where the interview room was at, and then like Nick, they asked me the same question. What do you think they do at this point in time? And it probably will change from a week from now, but I have a feeling they're going defensive line at that spot, and Pierce would be a guy that would be really intriguing to me if he's still on the board, and knowing that we see the biggest need on this Bears team is obviously offensive line. No doubt about it. Like we see this, but the Bears are still going to have a board here. They're still going to evaluate these prospects and see exactly where they stack up against each other. And if that player that they have graded is there and they feel comfortable at taking it and he's not an offensive lineman, the Bears are going to do it. Like that's going to be what's maybe will make some people surprised by the Bears selection, but if they need a defensive end opposite of Montez Sweat. They had issues with getting to the quarterback last season, and Montez regressed. Like you just didn't get enough out of that group. You also, you released DeMarcus Walker. Like there's a need for defensive linemen. So, I said to the one person I was talking to, I have a feeling it is going to be a defensive line. I go with a guy like Pearson if he's still on the board at 10. Now, as we kind of get further and further into this process, maybe they address that need in free agency. That can obviously change, but I'm going to go defensive line. And, with the guys you gave me, I'll go with Pearson's maybe that selection. What are you thinking out of those four?
Yeah. I would go with Will Campbell, the tackle. And I'm basing this solely off what, essentially PFF had, which was Genty's gone, Tyler Warren's gone, Stewart's gone, Membu's gone. So you're kind of looking at, like I said, Mason Graham, which would be intriguing to me. Like Pearson Graham, if you want to build in trenches for years to come, Graham, Pierce, Campbell, I think those are three solid options. I would lean Campbell right now. But like you said, I mean, it could change. Like we don't know, there was the rumors about Pierce kind of falling out of the first round by some people at the combine. I don't know how true it is. I don't know what is going on with him. Things could change. The Bears could bring him in for a top 30. Mason Graham, if he falls, what's the issue there? So, yeah, I just think between that, I'm going with the guy that probably right now had the better combine with Will Campbell. Like you ignore the short arms. Second fastest 40, or had the fastest 40 time among his offensive lineman group that first time. I think the broad jump or the standing jump, he had the highest or second highest. I just think you can get a guy who can come in, play guard right away, sign a center like Dahlman. I feel a lot better, about the Bears' offensive line. Am I still concerned? Yes. But I do feel a lot better. But then again, I look at your point, Montez Sweat did not have a big season. They released DeMarcus Walker. Dominique Robinson hasn't shown you anything. Austin Booker's had limited snaps. Like, are you relying on Darrell Taylor again? Like, are you going to find a pass rusher in the second round? It's kind of the beauty of the draft and free agency because, we could do this, in, 10 days from now, and the Bears could bring in a pass rusher or bring in another offensive lineman. We're kind of like, oh, okay, crap. Like, there goes, it changes things. I don't think it'll change everything, but it changes things.
No doubt. And that's why, this process is all hypothetical at this point until moves definitively are made. And so that's what does make this process fun for a lot of people. You're projecting, you're thinking, here are needs, here are players that make sense, and then moves start to get made. And then by the time we get to the draft, we'll have a clearer picture for sure of what a particular prospect could fit position of need. But we also have to see how those other teams have addressed some of those holes on their rosters by the time, the draft comes in. So yeah, it is fascinating. And I think a lot of it was just fun. Like for this year, I'm like you probably focus so much on the trenches. You're watching all these guys, listening to all these interviews and seeing, well, he makes sense. He also makes sense. Membu's rising up draft board. I even like a guy like Tate Ratledge from Georgia, like the mullet, like standing out. Like there's just so many things that catch your eye at this point in time. But as we, especially after that first wave of free agency, we're gonna have such a clear a more clear picture of what the Bears could potentially do, especially with that number 10 overall pick. But
Yep.
that's what makes this process so much fun.
Yeah, 100%. A few more questions. We'll kind of wrap things up here, but I had one for you. Was there a player that you were shocked at in terms of his performance at the combine, whether good or bad? Like, is there a player that, you're like, wow, he was going to test really well and he tested really poor? Was there a player that you thought was going to test and actually tested really well? Was there someone that stood out in that area to you?
That's a good question. To be completely honest, I didn't think that going back to James Pierce, I didn't think he would do as well as he did where everybody was talking to him.
Yeah.
Herb Howard actually went and saw like the 40s
Okay.
in person there. And like there was a audible like reaction when he ran what he did in terms of like that 40-yard dash. And like that I think is and there was a 4.47. Like that's
Yes.
insane from a defensive lineman. And to do that, like I think that whatever's going on in terms of maybe off the football field that's putting him in speculation of where he might land, you can't deny some of the physical traits that he has.
Yes.
And so that's why, again, this process is very interesting for teams. Can you take on a guy that may have whatever? I'm not saying that James Pierce does have any like big underlying issues, but like you see the physical traits though. And then if you put him in the right system, man, now you're going to get a productive football player maybe in year one or even start off the early on in the season. So I think seeing him run those times when he did 4.47, like I think I was like at a restaurant just eating, like seeing that like, oh crap. That's some serious speed right there.
Yeah. It shocked me too. I was following along on the TV and the new like combine tracker thing that they have.
Yeah.
And it was like seeing that I'm like, oh, okay, this dude's got some traits. This dude's still very raw. He can, but he's also got, he can rush the passer. He's pretty good. He's young. Yeah, he surprised me. The one that I was a little shocked by in terms of like bad combine, and it's a guy I mocked to the Bears at like day 3, was Tez Johnson, the wide receiver out of Oregon. Because I feel like we've heard a lot from him. You were down at the Senior Bowl, right? And I feel like he had a pretty damn good Senior Bowl with everything. Then he comes to the combine. I think he was like 10 pounds less or 10 pounds off his weight with the Senior Bowl. Ran a 4.5 140. And correct me if I'm wrong, he's like considered one of the fastest players in college football. For his size, he's like 5'10, 5'11, I think, or somewhere 5'10-ish. But like he did not have a good combine at all. Now, he could go out on his pro day and have a big pro day, but he's a guy I saw, the last couple of years. I'm like, okay, this guy could be a sneaky, it's not gonna be a day 1, early day 2, but he could be a guy that plays himself in the 3rd round, maybe, a 4th rounder. I mocked him to the Bears. I was like, guy kind of develop, maybe be what the Bears thought Tyler Scott was. But he was disappointing to me. And it kind of sucks because like, I do want the Bears to draft a wide receiver. So we'll have to kind of wait and see on that.
Especially the guy as small as he is, you want to see something like stand out in terms of speed or whatever it may be, but it does for teams, I think, put into question like, well, if he can't maybe separate, he doesn't have the speed that small of a frame. I think it just creates more questions than answers for NFL teams as they're looking to project guys into a league that's full of freaks of nature. So I think that makes it a little bit harder for Tez.
I saw it on Twitter too. Someone said like, this is a perfect example of why you can be fast, but you also have to learn how to run the 40-yard dash, like to show off your speed, which I guess is also kind of a good thing though for Tez, because like if you watch his tape, he's fast. Like you could see he's fast. And you're not going to be sitting there lining up to run a 40-yard dash, in an NFL game. So you're going to be quick. You're going to be like, you're going to be moving. So maybe it's actually not a terrible thing, but I was just a little shocked by the measurements. Last one I have for you. What's one thing you learned or one thing you stood out about the combine overall? It could be Bears, could be NFL. Could be your experience, anything you kind of want to note.
I think for me, this I mean, I'm trying to think what combine this is for me, to be completely honest, but it's just this is more of the networking kind of
Yeah.
side of things, just how to approach certain people. I think it's for anybody, it can be a little nerve-wracking. Like you see people all the time on social media, but then it's like meeting them and face to face for the first time, or whether that's a coach, former coach, whatever it may be. But I think the combine allows you to get out of your comfort zone, which I
Yes.
think is really good. And I met a lot of young aspiring reporters and journalists while, I was down in Indy, and they were there, which is already a great first opportunity for
Oh
them to
yeah.
just kind of get out there. So I think if you haven't been to the NFL scouting combine and you do want to try to network and meet people like this, that's a great place to do it. And you're going up to people that maybe you've seen online, but now you get a chance to maybe say hello, say what your story is. And you just never know what can come out of a small interaction. I've had, when I was coming into like doing this for the first time, it really did just take like a simple interaction on social media that led to things down the line. So
Yep.
I think just this combine really made that more apparent for me, like how important the networking part of things is, just so you can establish relationships, and you just never know what those relationships can amount to later on as you're going through your rise, or just your media career.
100%. I agree. I've been going since like 2019, I think.
Mm.
And every year I notice more and more. I'm like, I'm getting more comfortable talking to people. You want to just introduce yourself to people. Like, even like you'll see coaches, scouts,
Yep.
agents, like at dinner sitting next to a full agency. Matthew Berry was at the table, 3 spots down. NFL Network was at a table right there. So you're kind of just like, you kind of feel like in a way you belong because,
Hmm.
you're around so many people. But I mean, I can remember my first combine. I actually, the first time I had a chance to go, I skipped it. I didn't really know what it was about or anything like that. It was my first year on the beat. I'm like, I wasn't just like ready to go. I didn't really understand it. And then someone's like, yeah, you got to go, man. It's awesome. And every year it's great. Like besides, obviously I think it was like 2021, they didn't have it or whatever it was
Yeah.
due to COVID. But yeah, you're right, man. Like if you're an aspiring journalist, try to get a credential, try to get in there, talk to as many people as you can. I've met connections. I have a buddy who met last year who covers the Panthers, and I caught up with him, and it's good to kind of compare
Yep.
notes and talk to people like that. So that's the fun part of it all. The work, it's hard, but you get to
Hmm.
interact and meet with people and things like that. So Nick, thanks again, man, for joining me. Where can everyone follow you on social media and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so just at Nicholas Moreano is where I'm going to put everything on Twitter or X, whatever you like to call it. And then also just my YouTube channel at Nicholas Moreano. And, I've been writing a little bit here on Bear Report too. So you can see some of my work there from the combine. And as we kind of go through this process, I'm sure you can see more of my articles there as well.
For sure. And check out his YouTube page too, for sure. Because I know you do a lot of stuff. It's almost daily. It's like every other day or close to
Yeah,
daily.
trying to be a little bit more consistent with it. And
Yeah.
again, being more back into my routine of things will definitely help with that.
Yeah. Take it easy today, man. You need a day off too. Like you need to kind of reset yourself and
Yep.
take care of yourself. Thanks again, man. We'll have to do it again sometime soon. And take care, man.
See you, Zach.